So, hey, a heads up to all of our listeners. There are some swear words in today's episode. So, if you want a beeped version of our podcast, go to behumanproject.org, look for More Human, and you can find a beeped version. You are listening to More Human, the show where we share the stories that encourage leaders to make their businesses and organizations more human. I'm your host, Jeremy Newlick. It's just before sunrise, and I'm blaring music in my Ford Explorer, heading east through downtown St. Louis. And because there's not another soul in sight on the road, I'm lost in my own thoughts. Most of my thoughts have to do with regret, because I'd become the victim of my own thinking. Several weeks earlier, I had this idea to compose a day in the life feature on an interesting human for a business magazine. And rather than just call the guy and do a pseudo, hey, walk me through your day approach, I took the thing literally. So I asked my subject, assuming he would say no, hey, I'm going to be at your front door the moment you get out of bed. Is that cool with you? And he said yes. He was totally game. And his start time? 5:20 a.m. And this is March. So 5:20 is cold and dark. But I wanted to make good on my agreement. And so that's what placed me in an elevator of a downtown condo at 5:30 in the morning. The elevator doors open to a long hallway that seemed to go on into infinity. And after the doors to the elevator slam shut, there's this penetrating silence. I take a couple of steps down the hall, squinting at the doors and looking for the condo number. And that's when I first hear the coughing. It's faint, but it sounds like a deep cough. And with every step I take down the hall, the coughing, it's getting louder. I feel bad for whoever's producing it. There are brief moments when the coughing stops, but then it picks back up again, and it's getting louder and louder. And soon, I arrive at the door for my interview subject, and of course it turns out that behind that door is also the source of the coughing. Now, my immediate thoughts are extremely self-serving. Perfect. I will either need to reschedule this thing, or I will need to be with the person who's coughing all day. I hesitate to even knock. If he sounds like this all day, then how good of a story could I really write? But I knock. Gently. Like I was checking the box on knocking. I had already created an excuse. Oh, sorry. I tried your door, but there was no answer. A boxer-clad man answers the door. His body looks like it's carved out of wood. His ab muscles look like they were point and clicked into place. And with every cough, every fiber of his body tenses and changes resolution. And between the heaving coughs, he invites me inside. And we wander down this narrow hallway that is a wardrobe rack with women's clothing. It's probably here it should be mentioned, I suppose, that my interview subject is a fashion photographer. We pass into an open condominium, and the space is so completely Spartan. It doesn't look like anyone really lives there. There's no TV. There's no photos on the wall. Spare furniture. And to the left, his bedroom has a mattress on a minimal frame, and he indicates, again, through the coughing, that he is headed into the bedroom to shower and get ready. And I could make myself at home. I sit on a stool in the kitchen area, and I listen again to all the coughing. It begins to subside. It winds down, and my interview subject emerges. Blue jeans, cowboy boots, t-shirt, and vest. We're about to embark on a location shoot for a shoe brand. So I don't want to pose an awkward kind of thing here, but do we need to reschedule? You sound like you might be sick, so maybe you'd prefer if I'm not hovering all day. Oh no, he says. It's no big deal. I just have cystic fibrosis. And immediately, in my mind, I go through the mental files on disease. Cystic fibrosis. Now that sounded bad. Had I seen telethons on that? Don't people die young with that thing? This guy's 45-ish or something. Why is he still alive? But before I can think too much, we're already headed to the parking garage to get in his car. Now, I consider myself to be a fairly fit sort of individual. I run marathons, but this photographer, this guy with the disease, ran circles around me all day. We were moving boxes and lighting equipment and shouting directions, and he had a weird combination of like high expectations of every person we interacted with and an unadulterated joy about everything he was doing. And we were nonstop until 11:30 p.m. that night. And it wasn't until there, in the stillness of his condo, that I realized something. In just a few hours, he's gonna wake up. He's gonna be coughing again. And that is him every single day. And I wondered what that would be like. What if every day you wake up and you're confronted with the reality that this day could be your last one? Maybe this is the day that the thing finally kills you.
I can live every day really appreciating that day.
Right.
And that's just a real thing for me. And
it's not a Carpe Diem bumper sticker.
It's not a Carpe Diem bumper sticker. It's like a real
for
thing.
Real. Yeah.
And so if that is the trade-off, like maybe you'll have a somewhat shorter life, and maybe sometimes it'll be more difficult because of this, or there'll be challenges or pain involved, physical, emotional. What you will get from it is a greater, deeper appreciation. But then I also think like things like empathy, just simply like, you know, I could see a version of myself being a real cocky motherfucker.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I learned a certain degree of empathy,
humility,
right? Totally, from that helped me to put that energy into a path that was more productive and maybe a little more kinder, a little more human, as the podcast talks about.
Good theme, right? Good
or,
theme.
or at least to aspire to that more.
Today on More Human, we're bringing you the story of the man behind the voice you just heard, Attilio D'Agostino. Photographer, co-founder of Alive magazine, founder of St. Louis Fashion Week, a bunch of stuff, serial entrepreneur, all-around compelling figure. Attilio represents an odd kind of human experiment. He's an example of a life lived with the full knowledge of his mortality. And not in that Sylvia Plath kind of way, but in a very real way. What would your life be like, and what could be possible for you and the humans in your organization should you embrace this deep level of acceptance and consciousness of your mortality? Now that can seem like a dark topic, but Attilio's real human example makes certain it's not the case. And before we get into the particulars of his life, back to what makes that mortality very real for him, that cystic fibrosis thing, just to gain some appreciation for what his day-to-day has been like since his childhood, Attilio explained to us that cystic fibrosis is a disease that in large part impacts lung capacity. So even in our studio, at the time of our recording, he was breathing at about 32% of the oxygen that someone his age and weight ought to be able to access. Now, what does that mean for his life? Well, he won't be joining me for any of those marathon trainings, but he's not afraid to live right up to the limits imposed by his condition.
You know, there's real physical limitations. Like, I can't go out for a run tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that I slow down in any other aspect of my life short of that.
I've experienced that firsthand, so I know that's the case.
So, you know, it means that if I'm putting together a set and I'm setting up lights or I'm hauling in gear, I'm probably going to be breathing pretty heavily.
Right.
And I'm probably going to have to stop to cough a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be a little hard at moments, but I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what it means.
Right.
Is, If I work out, I go to the gym, I do a set of weights, I put those weights down, I'm going to cough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be a little bit out of breath. And then I'm going to lift them up, do another
Do
set
it
of
again.
weights, and I'm going to cough again,
Wow.
which makes for great abs.
Despite his present-day levity about his condition, Attilio didn't always have this attitude and outlook. As you might imagine, when he was diagnosed as a teenager and told he wouldn't live until he was 20, his reaction resembled that of deep nihilism, the kind that only adolescents can appreciate.
So at that time, I said, well, if I'm not going to live 19, I'm not going to spend the rest 4 years of my life inside the walls of this shitty ass high school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go take on the world.
Mm-hmm.
And through doing that, I went off on my own at a pretty young age and had a real wild teenage years, but also in the sense that I didn't have the normal constraints that most teenagers do on their comings and goings and all of that. But at the same time, I had to develop a sense of responsibility really fast because I was taking care of myself and had to pay rent and get food and all
You're
those
growing
things.
up fast,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
So, but I think that there was a wild side to that, yes, so once I passed that 19, 20, it certainly didn't kick in right away. I kind of got this sense of, wow, I'm here. Maybe I better do something to take care of myself
Okay.
and not just lead this crazy life going to raves and
Right.
maybe I should focus on my health more and sticking around.
How many times have we all reached crossroads like this? Now, maybe they aren't as dire as the one that Attilio is facing, but you get to a place and you know the right decision to make and the thing that would be good for you to do, and yet you lack the gumption or the wherewithal to actually follow through with it. But what makes Attilio different is that rather than analyze the need to do something, he made a swift decision to change course, and he took action. And that's a theme you're going to see repeated throughout the story.
The story could certainly sound romanticized,
Mm-hmm.
and it loses maybe the difficulties that were involved and the imperfection because it can be so easily romanticized. But the reality is, I said that, and then I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I became very focused on it
Mm-hmm.
and started working out intensely, monitoring my nutrition, learning what I could about nutrition from what I ate to supplements, and really lived that life and found that it made me much healthier and stronger than doctors at the time predicted could be achieved through healthful exercise, diet, and supplements, that type of a holistic approach outside of medicine.
What kind of sort of practices did you put in place for yourself when it comes to, when you say holistic medicine? What is it you kind of do?
Really, it literally started out with, and I haven't thought about this for a little while, but I was not in great shape at the time, and so I started walking my square block. And I would, try to jog one leg eventually.
Of that block. One of the straightaways, right? Yeah.
And then to jog 2 legs and then jog 3 legs. And they had a little workout room in the apartment complex that I lived in. And so started going into that workout room and trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the slow, part. Kind of got myself built up a little bit there. Through those workouts before I went and got a trainer. And I can remember this was at a place called LA Workout, like of all the damn names, right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
And do you remember, what was it called? American Gladiators, like the original incarnation?
Yeah. And they had like the characters, like Blaze. And,
Yes. So they worked out there.
No way.
Yes, because it's in LA, so of course that just
So,
happens
yeah.
everywhere.
It's bizarre.
I just like have this very vivid memory. I always remember going up to the like weights where you like curl your weights, like you do your curls, and I had like the 12-pound weight, and I'm like, ooh, he's struggling with a 12-pound weight, and that woman, like I know it was Blaze, whatever her name was, Laser or something,
Yeah, right.
like giant, tan, much taller than me anyway, and like blonde hair, like flowing mane, like walks up and like I don't even know what weights she picked up. She picks up these giant weights and like standing right next to me, she's just like curling her waist. So I was like,
During Attilio's phase of building his physical strength, he was also working to engage himself intellectually and politically. He was working for Tom Hayden as a legislative aide. Hayden was a lion of the 60s and the radical left turned member of the California Senate. And you can imagine for a young Attilio at that time, since he had come to some understanding that he was indeed planning on living, that he wanted to have an impact on the world and that impact could be maximized. And he saw that his role in working for Hayden was in alignment with that sort of goal. But by the early 90s, Attilio had already become disenchanted with the political world. The Hayden office was in LA during the '92 rebellion from the Rodney King verdict, and many of the changes that he felt he was working on making were not taking hold. He had visions of a more just and equitable world, and though he and a team of activists had worked hard, the changes they made felt superficial. So he started to toy with this notion of going into business for himself, as a personal trainer, opening his own gym. And since he had a natural affinity for the work, and he felt like that work made an impact on people, this idea just started to germinate. And around that same time, he also met a woman, and they fell in love. And a few months into the thing, she made a decision to finish her degree at Indiana University, a world away from Los Angeles. So Attilio was at a crossroads. He could stay in California and continue his work with the state senate, or he could completely uproot his West Coast life for a new start in Bloomington, Indiana, the home of Johnny Cougar, and begin a sort of entrepreneurial fitness journey.
what I found was on a personal level, the things that attracted me to politics
really?
and activism in the first place.
Really? So what were those things?
Building community and having a personal connection with someone that can be a positive impact on their life. And as any personal trainer will probably tell you, you can become very intimately involved with your clients in terms of a strong a relationship, like strong personal relationship. You will both often end up caring a lot about each other's lives. And so for me, learning about people's lives and helping them to pursue a path to their own personal improvement through physical activity, I found that to be very meaningful. It was a very direct connection to helping people to improve their lives.
Attilio arrives in Bloomington, Indiana, and almost right away, he sets up his personal training business. He's seeing clients right and left, and he's beginning to have the kind of impact that he was hoping to have from his political days. And it's actually through a fluke occurrence that he and the aerobics instructor at the gym have an opportunity to purchase that gym and its equipment from the original owner. They use that as a chance to start their own space, and Evolution Fitness is born in late 1996. And it was then that Attilio met a person connected to the fitness world with a very different business model. And being a keen observer of systems that he is, Attilio begins to apply what he sees in retail to his own aspirations.
I met a guy and became friends with a guy who had a women's apparel retail store, like a little boutique.
Okay.
And really just through talking about him, I started to understand, talking with him, the concepts of retail, right? Like he would buy things wholesale, sell them retail, and that whole thing. Seeing somebody like that's, I often think of mentorships, right? I think mentorships can be so important because just somebody seeing how something's done, like those mechanisms, can help them connect the dots to then go do it. Where the gap was, what's the architecture of how this world or life works?
You just needed to see the machinery.
Yeah. And then you can reverse engineer that or engineer that in your own way.
Right.
But it's hard to take that leap without seeing it.
It's like you play life by ear, because you're like watching the thing being orchestrated, done, and then you're like, oh, I can play that. Okay.
I think it's a great way of putting it.
Okay.
Absolutely. So but if in this case initially, it was just for me. I was like, oh, I could order my supplements for myself and pay a lot less. And that's
Awesome.
it.
Right.
Because I own a business now. Woo! So I'll call them up and be like, hey, I own a business.
Hi,
Send me my supplements for less.
Oh, I see. So you're just like, okay. So you just spin up a business so that you can call up and buy things wholesale.
Right.
At a reduced rate, so
Right.
that you can get the things that you're wanting for your own needs, for taking care of your body, for being the trainer you want to be, all that stuff.
Yes.
Interesting.
And so then
Okay.
I was
So
calling
then
the
you're like-
wholesale warehouse,
Right.
having my supplements shipped to me,
Yeah.
getting the wholesale catalog with all the prices, knowing what the prices were at the GNC.
Yeah.
And I literally said, I don't know, I'm not doing anything at night, and it's just, I don't have anything to lose. I wonder if I put out a flyer and said, I just made up the flyer.
You're
and it
still
said,
so punk rock.
tear up
What if I
your-
make up a flyer?
Sorry.
Sorry.
With the little tabs on the bottom,
Yeah,
you like
like
slice
you
it with
slice
the
it
phone
off,
numbers.
right.
Yep. Oh yeah, it had the sliced up phone numbers.
Oh yeah.
And said, tear up your GNC Gold card.
Nice.
I sell for less every day.
Good copywriting.
I mean, it worked. So I take those flyers, really bright. Like, remember you could go to Kinko's and get like
The
rocket
neon.
ship yellow or whatever it was called?
Yeah.
So I took those and just put them all over the dorms, the workout spaces, and the fraternities at IU. And the guys started calling me because I did things like, whatever at the time EAS was a big deal. And whatever, like a box of Myoplex was $100. But I could buy it wholesale for $42 if I bought like 15. So I'm like, well, if I can get it for $42, I'll sell it to them for $59.99.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they go to GNC? Well,
Right.
they wouldn't.
Right.
I mean, at least
Right.
they didn't.
Supply demand works here.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have no
Can be a-
overhead except my gym, which I've already got, and I don't have any employees, and it's another, $20 in my pocket.
You're managing inventory.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So literally, people started calling me, placing orders. What can you charge for creatine? This, that.
You're a legal drug dealer.
Illegal drug dealer. And I would get all this stuff in. I would load up my car, and I would drive around to them. I'd give them their supplements. There was no
Literally out of
Square
the
credit card processing.
Trunk of your car, cash.
Trunk of my car. Give me cash. Here's your supplements.
So, since the network of fraternities and people who would take supplements is so small, of course, it's only a period of time before some of those bros who were buying out of the trunk of his car started showing up at the gym. And so Attilio set up a special counter and a closet for managing the inventory. People would come in, I want my supplements. He would walk over there, go into the closet, get him their supplements. Easy enough.
Once it's doing well, and I think, I think there's potential here, and I start to analyze it more and say, well, I could, have a retail store. I could actually get a storefront, and I think these numbers work where I'm doing enough volume. If I keep up this volume, I can make a storefront work if it's a no-frills storefront.
Okay.
But Bloomington's not big enough for that.
On the search for the right location for his retail vision, Attilio spends his weekends in his car driving around a whole host of Midwestern cities. Cincinnati, Louisville, Des Moines, Kansas City. And what precisely he's looking for, he doesn't really know. But he does believe that he'll know it when he sees it.
St. Louis reminded me of a combination of Chicago and LA.
That's fair.
And
Interesting. From architecture, feel,
yeah,
personalities, I mean, across different.
across that board together. You know, it was just something about it. There was a little bit of a Western sense to it. And, you know, maybe that's the Western Southern. I don't know exactly that Mark Twain
Right.
thing going in there. Mark Twain was Hannibal and San Francisco. So
Makes sense.
there's these connections.
Okay.
And then Chicago and the city of big shoulders and the brick and the sturdy and the, you know, 19th century buildings, warehouses, and neighborhoods.
Right.
And for somebody from LA, in Chicago or anytime I ever experienced that was very romantic to me anyway. Because there's no trees in Los Angeles and it's just chaparral and everything is stucco.
Right.
So bricks and trees and corn is going to be very romantic.
Right. The depth of the colors, the green, yeah, I get you.
I related to The Outsiders. So I thought I was like in an S.E. Hutton novel when I moved to the Midwest.
Stay gold.
Right.
Right. Gotcha.
So, you know, there was just kind of like that thing attracted me, but it specifically St. Louis did it for me.
Okay.
And when I found, because again, you couldn't Google at the time, right? So how do you find a business to rent? How do you find a space to rent for your business? Back then, I can't even really remember what the options were.
You like rolled around or you like looked at some, I guess, commercial property papers? They probably had some rags for that. Maybe not. I don't know.
I went to a real estate office.
Yeah, sure.
And the guy like drove me around and he's talking about traffic on the street every day and the number of people that live in a 1, 5, and 20 mile radius.
And
I'm
you're
like,
nodding along like you know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did, you know, I was not a total bumpkin. Like,
Right.
I did have some ideas I look back on now and I'm like, well, that's pretty smart.
Right.
Like I was like down Manchester Road and I said, here's a GNC, here's a Bally's, here's a Gold's Gym.
Obviously.
Here's another GNC.
There's a market for this, right?
Yeah. Like, this might be a really
Might be
good
a good
spot.
Yeah.
And so that was the spot that I took.
So with his shop's location established, Attilio just needed to find a steady stream of muscle-building clientele to flock to him. And because he was new to the market, and the market of St. Louis is bigger than Indiana University's campus, he had to find a way to expand his reach that he could still afford. So he started calling around to local radio stations.
I don't know why I thought I should do this or what the fuck I was thinking, but I thought that I should voice the ads because that would be that personal connection.
Sure.
But that I should imitate Arnold Schwarzenegger
Wait.
as the tagline. No, I really did.
That's getting a lot of laughs around the studio. So
Tell the
now,
GNC Gold card we sell for less every day.
that's pretty great. This simple, gimmicky marketing strategy, it totally worked. His passion for supplements fueled an expansion that most entrepreneurs would be jealous of. And in just a few years, Attilio's supplements expanded to over 13 locations throughout the St. Louis region. The Midwestern suburban folks loved the straightforward, no-frills stores, and because his name was on the stores and his voice was on the commercials, Attilio himself had gained some notoriety. But Attilio, once again, found himself at a crossroads. He felt the weight of managing a company of this size had created a distance between him and his customers. And just like when he was back in California working for Tom Hayden, this feeling of not being able to have an impact on the lives of people was completely objectionable to him.
I loved supplements. I loved all of that when I had a personal connection with people, when I was at the counter, when I was talking to people, working with them, getting them their supplements.
Right.
When I had 13 stores and I was the manager of 13 stores, I didn't love that life at all.
What were intimate customer experiences at supplement stores packed with the promise of life transformations had become the managing of spreadsheets and HR policies. This thing that started with wonderful intentions for Attilio had become a drag. And I want to pause here because I think it's an important theme that emerges with each of these crossroads for Attilio. As he goes on his journey, there are principles he is just unwilling to compromise. And I bring this up because I think a lot of us have had these intuitions or ideas. But either because of our biases or sunk cost fallacies, we have lacked the courage to change course. So remember that. More to come on that later. And around this time, Attilio had begun to feel less fulfilled. A new opportunity started to emerge. Because most of the people who were taking supplements had weight loss or muscle gaining goals, they had a need for more information, recipes, diet plans, workout regimes. So a newsletter or something that could be distributed through stores would at least help him to feel closer to reaching his audience. At the same time, Elizabeth Tucker, fresh out of high school, was hired to work in the back office of Attilio's discount supplement stores, and she started to show a great capability in managing strategy and people. And Kelly Hamilton, another new hire, had shown an aptitude for writing, communications. So between the three of them, Attilio, Elizabeth, Kelly, they started to get serious about an editorial style and a direction for this newsletter. And this newsletter that just started, a free zine on the racks in the front of a discount supplement store, became a live magazine. The publication that is today a lifestyle media company highlighting artists and creatives all across the Midwest.
While we were still running the stores, we distributed it through the stores, but then also, and I don't even remember where this came from, but maybe it might have just been seeing it out, other publications out in the community, like, and thinking,
in racks.
Right. If we put it out there, then it becomes also an advertising tool for us to bring people into the store.
Right.
And it also, but through that distribution, we could sell ads to support the publication beyond just it bringing us business. Then when we sold off the stores, we kept the publication.
The letting go of the stores was the most casual of mentions. I mean, could you even imagine that? Like, you spend years building something that has your name on it, something that has your voice promoting it, in an industry you care about. And at its peak performance, when you have expanded into new markets and ideas, you just let it go. And why? Because it is fundamentally unsatisfying. Because it no longer serves the depth of the experience you wanted. So you jettison the thing. And for what? A media company. I mean, didn't someone tell Attilio that print is dead? Didn't someone work to reason with him on creating a size of market potential or at least a business canvas? There was none of that. Attilio has lived and continues to live by a very simple principle. And it's why the story is not romantic. It's not a carpe diem bumper sticker. It is, however, what is possible if you understand that today could be your last day.
If you realize that every day is a precious gift, you don't want to waste that day doing what is not, you don't love and what's not meaningful to you.
Right, why would you? Right.
It doesn't matter if somebody's paying you for it, because what is $100,000? What is $1 million? What is $10 million? What is $1 billion? If you only have a day.
Right.
And if what means most to you is the day and not the dollar.
As Alive evolved, so did the areas on which the magazine would focus. The expansion of what was a newsletter for supplement shoppers began to take on a life and breadth that reflected the areas Attilio always held dear about what makes a community.
As our business grew to become more dependent upon advertising in the lifestyle space, it aligned with what my personal interests had always been. So going back to those teenage years, my personal interests had always been in modern design, fashion, architecture, furniture, and publication design. visual communication. Photography, never in the sense of, I want to be a photographer, or I'm studying images as I love photography. I love to look at photos because I love photography, but it was in terms of I love design and receiving that was through images. I loved fashion, getting that was through images. I loved architecture, modernist movements, and receiving that was through visual mediums. So I was my personal life had always revolved around visual communication in that way.
Several years into Alive's existence, the publication began to carve a niche. It had a following, a real readership. And it was around this time that Attilio helped to gather a team from inside and from outside the publication that would launch the St. Louis Fashion Week, something that's still going strong to this day. And he became dedicated to raising the visibility of the creative class in what is generally perceived as an average Midwestern city. And since he'd become creative director for the publication, he would often go on the feature photo shoots. And Attilio would act as an assistant and would pay close attention to the mechanics involved in capturing images. But even paying close attention couldn't have prepared him for what happened on what was supposed to be a casual photo session.
I ended up shooting an editorial that wasn't planned for me to shoot, and it was a fashion story.
Oh, wow.
And
so we booked a photographer, can't work out,
yeah,
thing's gonna be due,
yes.
here's your camera.
So we had a hair and makeup artist,
Yeah.
Bob Pitts, who had Studio 703 Salon here, who he was a photographer and had a career as a fashion photographer. And he would always bring his cameras to the sets and take behind the scene pictures, just play around because he loved taking pictures. So I said, Bob, can you give me your camera and show me how to make everything lighter and darker? And he gave me a down and dirty tutorial in the knobs and dials. And I knew I already had the story built.
Right.
Working with our stylist and fashion editor, Jill Manoff, we'd already chosen all the outfits. We knew what our story was. I knew what all our scenes were. So I knew what the frame was for the image. We had our model. We knew what our makeup plan was. So for me, thinking about it then, that time and place, I already knew what my frame was. I just had to get there and make sure that you could see the light and the camera worked and operated and captured that frame, that image that I wanted to see. And that story was successful. And the people who were around that model, and they are still significant in the world of St. Louis, Jeff and Mary Clark at Mother Model, gave me the opportunity from that to work with their models shooting model tests.
So what started as a passing sort of appreciation for photography, almost overnight turned into a new pursuit for Attilio. And today, if you Google his name, you will be flooded with images of high fashion photo shoots. And that's because it took Attilio just a matter of hours to unpack and learn what it takes most people to develop after a number of years. I mean, today he is a legit fashion photographer. Again, most people I know, even really accomplished people, would want to ensure that they had the proper rigor and understanding before attempting such a pursuit, right? So they would want to make sure that they had studied political science before getting into politics, and studied business before, founding a company, or studied art before becoming a photographer. But the need for crossing those kinds of chasms is just not a thing for Attilio. I mean, to review, he has gone from skater punk dropout to political activist to personal trainer, supplement slinger, business owner, and then publication founder, and now to fashion photographer. And nowhere in there did you hear anything about, I have no business doing this.
It's like, I am definitely fearless. Like, let's just analyze it like that. I will do. I don't think of it as reinventing myself. I do what I want to do, and I don't worry about what I think of as artificial rules that people create for themselves. And that was the same thing going back to when I was 14 and said, what is this rule? Like, oh, I have to go to high school and then I have to do this and I have to do that. Like, I don't know how long I'm going to be on this planet, but I can do whatever I want to do. And it's no different now. Like, if this is what I want to do, excuse me, and I want to pursue that, and I have the passion to do it and the kind of like the ability to a certain extent or the willingness to learn, then because somebody else's rule saying you can't be a photographer because you didn't go to art school and because you sold supplements, like those rules, I don't know what that means. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I do not know what that means.
There is a fuck you to
Right.
your kind of,
Okay.
right? I mean, is that kind of what you're saying? Like, it's kind of like I don't have any need for that. That's irrelevant to me.
And I think it is fundamentally for everybody. I think so many of those rules are artificial constructs that people have created for themselves. And so to me, it's not reinvention because I'm not reinventing anything. I'm just continuing to do what it is that I want to do.
Do you think that kind of approach that you've taken to your professional life, to creatively who you are, is something that's available to all people? Or do you think that that's something that you are more somehow capable of doing than maybe other people are? In terms of being this willing to be fearless and go out and do the thing that drives you?
I think that I recognize that in my life, I've had certain advantages and privileges that have allowed me to do that. So the family that I come from is I was raised by two really smart scientists, and they exposed me to a lot of cultural richness. They exposed me to a lot of modeling of how to be educated. They taught me to read at a really young age and built my world around reading things of real quality and engaging with the world in a really deep way. And I don't think that I can disconnect those benefits and assets that I came into my 14-year-old self with, my 20-year-old self, and my 30-year-old self, and on from everything. And so coming from that place of privilege built a foundation for me to achieve these things. I had these assets already. I understood what modern design was. I knew how to go to a library and where to look. What can we do as a society to make sure that everybody in our community has those same advantages? Because what that also fundamentally means is it's an accident of birth.
Right. I get what you mean.
And so I shouldn't be able to benefit just because I was accidentally born into these assets, or somebody else is able to benefit because they're born into maybe a financial asset or whatever it is, whether it's an intellectual asset or a financial asset, certainly had a head start in the birth.
Right.
And then how does that work for other people that didn't have financial or intellectual head start in terms of
They didn't have the
birth?
privileges that you had.
Right. Weren't set into the world with those assets.
If you think that you were able to achieve your next thing that you want to achieve, let's say over the period of the next few years, and being sensitive to the fact that you know, that I know that you live every day as though it could be like, hey, something could happen, which I know oddly is the truth for everyone, but for you especially, right? It's like part of your consciousness. But like, if you were able to achieve what you're hoping to do over a period of years, what do you think would be different about the world if you were able to communicate what you really wanted to communicate? What do you think the world would be like? How do you think it would be changed?
Well,
how do you hope it would be changed?
I answer that in just a slightly different way, which is, I don't think that there's any one thing that I can do that's going to change it in that way.
Sure.
But I think that I really can contribute through the actions that I choose and the choices that I make and the world that I contribute to building to having a more equitable world around me and leaving a more equitable world behind. So that is what I say was important to me. And I don't think that I can do that on my own, but I think that I can make meaningful contributions along with other people.
If he's lucky, tomorrow morning, Attilio will wake, and he's going to cough. The stark reminder of a disease that could take his life won't be felt through some abstraction. It will be felt with pain. The pain will start in his lungs, and eventually it'll feel like battery acid burning through his back and ab muscles. And maybe, tomorrow morning, the whole panoply of human responses will cycle through his mind. Perhaps he will drift into the nihilism of his youth. And could you blame him? Who among us would not find existence pointless if it means so much pain? Maybe he will relive the images of the uprising in Los Angeles after the Rodney King verdict. And he will think of the heartbreak at not being able to do more to prevent such violence. And maybe this will trigger some regret in not sticking with politics. Maybe, as he fights for air in his daily morning ritual, he will think of the company he could have built, or the money he could have made if he hadn't sold off the supplement business. And somewhere, in the recesses of his mind, the voices of the people who told him what he could have done and how foolish he was. Maybe, just for a moment, maybe, he thinks they're right. Actually, never mind all that. There's no way that's on his mind. I know this because he cannot waste a moment on regret or self-loathing. And on this, there is no maybe. I do not have to speculate. Attilio will undoubtedly be thinking of what he must do. He will be thinking of the part he must play in the hours that remain in creating a more equitable world. Tomorrow morning, when he's finally able to catch his breath, he will be filled with a sense of conviction that only the dying can be. That much I know for sure. What I don't know is what you will be like tomorrow morning, when you are awakened with the glowing phone in the dark. What will you do, now that you've heard this story? What will you do? Will you embrace the odd paradox of this human existence, knowing that you too are among the dying, and that there's only today, and at the same time, that our conviction only matters if we're able to have hope of futures that don't yet exist? What will tomorrow morning be for you? And what will you make of the hours alongside your fellow dying earthly travelers? This has been More Human, a production of the Be Human Project. Editing and sound design by Khalees Walker, with art direction by Steph Sabo. It's written and hosted by me. Our intro music is provided by Snarky Puppy. Additional music by Aalto, Broke for Free, and Rafael, Archangel. We record and produce this thing at our studio at Big Wide Sky, a human business consultancy. To subscribe to More Human, search for More Human anywhere you subscribe to podcasts. And to learn more about the Be Human Project, or if you dig anything you heard today, check out our website at behumanproject.org. And visit often. We love humans.